All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to my college football show. I am Terry. Uh, some people call me T, but I'm Terry, and I'm the host here of the Unprofessional College Football Show. So thank you for clicking and giving me a chance or rewatching, giving me a chance if you happen to be in here live, which I doubt there's many, if any, because this is my first stream ever. So as far as streaming football, it's my first stream ever. So we're going to get into it here. I'm going to go through real quick and just give a little bit of heads up about me. Uh, I've had a YouTube channel before. I've never really done much of the live streaming, but I did have a YouTube channel before that. What I actually did is we used, like, me and my brother and my wife, and we actually did college football predictions. Um, but honestly, with the transfer portal and everything the way it is now, it's getting really, I mean, it was hard before, but it's getting really, really hard to keep up with everything enough to make predictions. Especially that be the only thing you do. But what I enjoy doing is just talking football. So that's what I'm going to do. So hopefully, if you like talking football, feel free to sign up, join, mix it up in the comments, come talk to me, because I can promise you I won't be anything like probably you've ever seen before. I'm going to be a little different in my opinions. Um, so let's see. But let's start. We're going to start at the top. And we're going to start with the two-time defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. So obviously, number one team. We're going to go with the AP poll. And looking at these teams, we're going to start with Georgia, obviously, number one. Uh, like I said, two-time defending national champion, fully deserving of the number one ranking going into the season. Can't argue much about it. But let's get into the weeds here a little bit. So Georgia, obviously number one. Their over-under wins for the year is 11 and a half. So let's talk about Georgia. Uh, Spoiler alert, Georgia's going to be pretty good this year. I know I'm going out on a limb and saying that, but I think, I'm big on Georgia this year, but I'm not as big as many. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I'm expecting a slight dip from Georgia. Okay. I'm not saying, I don't even want to say a step back, because really to me, it's not even a step back. I'm talking when it's a small drawback, a small step back. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny step back. But they do lose Stetson Bennett, you know. And to be honest with you, a couple years ago, I wasn't a big Stetson Bennett fan. Me and the people I watch games with, we didn't think Stetson was a great quarterback. Some people still tend to think that Stetson isn't a good quarterback. I don't get that. Stetson was a very good quarterback. But anyway, so talking about Georgia, I do think there's going to be a slight step back from the quarterback position. And not so much in what a lot of people think. A lot of people say, well, Stetson, he didn't have the NFL arm, and, he was kind of shorter, wasn't really a pocket guy. But to me, where Georgia's going to miss Stetson the most is actually in the run game. Um, a lot of people that don't really keep up with Georgia, they don't realize that the last couple of years, a large part of their rushing game was Stetson. He ran that triple option, almost to perfection. But after about 12 years, you should be pretty good. So yeah, not kid. But anyway, so I think they take a step back there. Okay, I mean, not major. I think Beck's going to be really good. I like Carson. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. But the one thing about him, where the drawback from comparing him and Stetson, is Stetson could run, and he was a major part of the rushing attack. Beck's not going to be a major part of the rushing attack. So you're going to have to get your rushing yards pretty much from your backs and maybe sweeps and stuff, sweeps to your receivers and whatnot. But, and don't get me wrong. Look, I'm talking about, these are champagne problems, okay? Georgia's going to be fine, but I do think they do take a step back. But they've got an offensive line that's going to be pretty dominant. Whenever you have a good offensive line, you're going to run the ball. To be honest with you, you can't run or throw without a good line. I've been watching football for many, many years. And I've never seen a team with a bad line have a good offense, ever. Because you can't do anything when you can't block. You can't run the ball. You can't block for the pass. You can't do anything. So, and Georgia's going to be fine there. So I do think the offense does take a step back because honestly, the running backs, Georgia's got good running backs. Don't get me wrong. They got good running backs, but there's not a lot of guys back there that just scare you. They're good. They have a good stable, a good committee of backs. I think Kendall Milton, probably the best, he's a senior, probably the best back they got. And I think there's a pretty decent drop-off after him. Could be wrong. So I do see them taking a step back on offense a little bit. Defense is still going to be good. Yeah, as long as Kirby's there, man, I like Kirby Smart. Kirby's smart. He's a defensive guy. He really knows defense. And I really like Kirby as a head coach. So I see Georgia. Their schedule is weak. They really only have about 2 games they could lose. Honestly. That being Tennessee, they got to go to Knoxville and play Tennessee, and then they play Ole Miss. And I actually think Ole Miss is more of a threat than most people give them credit for. I don't know. I don't think Ole Miss's defense is going to be ready this year, though. Offense will be good. Defense, not so much. Give Pete a little time. I think Pete will get it going. So, where do I see Georgia landing? Okay, their over-under's 11.5. So basically, people think, hey, they're either going to win 11 or 12 games. Well, I'm right there. I think they go 11-1. I do think they drop a game in the regular season. I'm only predicting regular season right now. I really don't like to predict game by game type stuff until I see teams play. Because honestly, even doing predictions like this, I'm different than a lot of people in that I really try to cut off last year for the most part out of my mind when I'm thinking about this coming year. Yeah, not totally, because you have to look at things such as returning starters, guys coming back, getting better, changing positions, whatever. So, yeah, you can take some of that, but sometimes people put too much meaning into what happened last year. And I'm not that type. I try to stay in the zone and try not to get too excited or, not think enough about it. That's where you can get in trouble in spring games doing that too, even though you can glean some. So anyway, Georgia. I got them 11-1. I also have them making the playoffs. Okay, so that's my first playoff team. Okay, at number 2, you got the Michigan Wolverines. Like Michigan this year. Really like Michigan this year. Not the biggest Jim Harbaugh fan, personality-wise, but I do think he's a good coach. The big thing on Harbaugh, a few years ago was, well, he can't beat Ohio State. Till he did. And that's the way a lot of things are. And that's the reason I'm careful not to diss anybody's predictions, because Man, there's stuff happens every year that people look back and go, wow, I could have never predicted that to happen. So, who was the prediction to win the national title last year? Like before the season started, everybody said Alabama. Who didn't make the playoffs? Alabama. So, just because everybody's predicting something doesn't mean that it's going to come true. So, anyway, back to Michigan. Uh, got a returning quarterback, which is something that none of the top four can say, which I think gives them a big advantage. Michigan last year won the Joe Moore Award. They return a lot of that line. They're going to have a good line. Corum is a great back, and they've got other backs there. It's not just Corum. So, Michigan, I think, is going to be solid on offense. They're going to be able to run. They're going to be able to throw. They're going to keep defenses off balance. Michigan's defense is also going to be good this year. Michigan's over-under is 10.5. Just to give you an idea, Georgia is the only team with above a 10.5 over-under this year. That tells me that, boy, there's not any elite teams really out there this year. And I think the reason you're seeing that is because Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama are all replacing quarterbacks. Ohio State and Alabama, as of this recording, have not even named their quarterbacks yet. So there's that. But anyway, back to Michigan real quick. We'll have a solid defense, experienced quarterback, good offensive line, good running game. I think the receivers will be solid. I have Michigan going 12-0. Okay. And I got Michigan making the playoffs, believe it or not, undefeated. So I got Michigan making the playoffs as the 1 seed. So I know I'm saying I'm not predicting too in depth, but I actually do think Michigan will go undefeated and capture the number 1 seed in the playoffs. Okay. So number 3, we have the Ohio State University. Ohio State and Alabama this year are very, very similar teams. Okay. First thing, neither one's named a starting quarterback yet. Second thing, they got talented options. So I don't think whoever wins the job, we'll talk about Ohio State for now. Whoever wins the job at Ohio State is going to be good. They're going to be surrounded with talent. They're going to have a good offensive line. They're going to have good backs. I love Travion Henderson. Obviously, the receiver core they got is probably top in the nation. If not, it's the top 2 or 3. So, yeah, their offense, it's going to be good. Basically, with whoever's under center. They're just going to be surrounded with too much talent. And Ohio State does not have the toughest schedule in the world. Other than, they do have to play Michigan and they do have to play some of the better teams in the Big Ten. So Ohio State, their over-under is 10.5. I've got Ohio State going 10-2. I think they drop, obviously, the Michigan game because I predicted Michigan to go undefeated, which would mean that Ohio State would have to lose to them. But I also think Ohio State drops one somewhere along the line. I think that they go into Michigan with a loss, and that game is kind of, the winner will win the Big Ten kind of thing. And I just think Michigan, they're kind of on a roll right now too. I think that's part of it. And rivalry games tend to go in stretches. From all the rivalry games I've ever watched, they tend to go in streaks. And I think, Michigan's on a streak right now. They're starting a streak, and I think they're going to continue it. But would not shock me to see Ohio State at 11-1, though, and sneaking in the playoffs. But my prediction is going to be 10-2 right now. That might change after I see them play a game or two. So, okay. So next, number 4, Alabama. Okay. Talked about them a little bit earlier. Big question with Alabama. Quarterback. You got 3 candidates. Really. I tend to lean to most. I think Jalen Milroe will get the start in the opener against Middle Tennessee State. I don't know if he will be the quarterback all year. I could see someone like Ty Simpson possibly overtaking him. And I'm a little bit different on Alabama. The Alabama is going to be they're going to be different this year on offense. If you're used to seeing, like if you haven't paid attention since the end of last year, this is not going to be the same Alabama team. Bryce Young is gone. Bill O'Brien is gone. Some would say thank God. And, Tommy Rees has come in from Notre Dame. I like Tommy Rees. I think he's going to do a great job at Alabama. Alabama's looking at being much more physical this year. And I see it happening. I see them being able to run the ball. And they sure got a stable of backs. You got Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams. Then you got Justice Haynes coming in, Jam Miller. I'm super excited about him. And Alabama's defense is going to be improved, I believe. I'm going to say this because I've always felt this about Pete Golding. If you know Alabama's former defensive coordinator, Pete Golding. He left after this year and he went to Ole Miss. So the thing about Pete is a really smart guy. I mean, you can just listen to the guy talk about football for 5 minutes and you're like, man, this guy is smart. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to football. The thing about Pete, though, is I feel like Pete wasn't as good as at getting that knowledge to his players and have them play with the same confidence he had. And I think that's where Pete struggled as a defensive coordinator, is he assumed that his players know as much as he did. And it's impossible. It's impossible for these kids that's been there a year, 2 years, or just got there. To me, his defenses, he would call stuff too complicated. And the defense, whereas they're super talented, a lot of times they were out there thinking too much. And you can't be thinking out there when you're playing, because if you stop for a half a second, that's all you need, or that's all the other team needs, is a half a second to get by you. And I think that's what happened a lot last year. Teams would scheme us, and they would, they would get our defensive backs, our slower defensive backs, on faster receivers, and we would never get out of it. So, I mean, that's where I think Pete struggled as a defensive coordinator. But I think with Saban bringing back Kevin Steele, I think this is going to be a much more disciplined defense. And I think that's going to make a lot of difference. So anyway, looking at Alabama's over-unders 10.5. I got Alabama going 10-2. I think Bama's got a pretty tough schedule. They're going to host Texas in week 2. That's going to be a very, very tough game. I think I'm going to lean Texas right now in that one. And I think they drop another one along the way. Alabama has the talent to go 12-0. Ohio State has the talent to go 12-0. Georgia has the talent to go 12-0. But I do believe in every case the quarterback is going to hold the teams back a little bit. Alabama, I like Milroe. package, the ability to run, the ability to throw. Where I've saw that Milroe has struggled, and I really haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, but where I've saw that Milroe has struggled the most is in his decision making as far as when to release the ball. What I've seen is he tends to wait until his receiver gets open. So, his guy's running a post or whatever, and he's waiting until his guy gets his defender beat. And then when that happens, he's making the throw. That works in high school. That doesn't work in college because, especially in the SEC, the defenders are too quick. If you wait a half a second, just like I talked about defense, if you're having to think and as you got waiting a half a second to think, guys can cover a lot of ground in a half a second. Same thing happens the other way. So I see Alabama, if they get a decent quarterback play, decent quarterback plays 10 wins. If they get pretty good quarterback play, they'll win 11 or 12 because they have the talent everywhere else. Just got to get the quarterback. But I think whoever does win the job is going to be good, okay? They're not going to stink. Too much talent there. Saban's not going to put a quarterback that stinks out. So anyway, okay, so that's number 4. So I had Ohio State at 10-2. I got Alabama at 10-2. Next, we got LSU. I'm pretty high on LSU this year. I think that they could be one of Alabama's 2 losses. Very easily could be one of Alabama's 2 losses. LSU's over-under is 9.5, which I think is pretty close. I think the over-unders are pretty close this year. There's a few that I went off on, but really I'm up close on either side of them. So anyway, LSU 9.5. I've got LSU this year going 10-2. I've got them and Alabama both being 10-2. Right there toward the top of the SEC West, battling for the chance to go to Atlanta. And it's going to depend upon, does LSU beat Alabama head-to-head, or does Alabama beat them head-to-head, and who owns the tiebreaker in order for who goes to Atlanta. I tend to lean Alabama right now just because the game's at home. If the game was on the road, I would give LSU the advantage for sure. But so LSU, like Brian Kelly when he first got there, when everybody else said they didn't think he would be a good fit, I called Bumpkus and I said, the guy can coach. It doesn't matter if he's in South Bend, Indiana, or if he's in, Louisiana. He's going to be able to recruit, which he has proven to do. And he's proven he's a good coach. I think they were a year ahead of schedule a little bit. But I think LSU has the capability. Boy, if they win that opener against Florida State, they have the capability to run the table. Okay? That is not what I'm predicting. Okay? Obviously, I was going 10-2. So I don't think they're going to run the table, but if they do get that Florida State game, that's going to be that may get them off to a hot start, and they may be hard to ever catch. So anyway, looking at LSU, okay, I like Jaden Daniels. I liked him when he was at Arizona State. When he came to LSU, I thought, hey, this will be a good fit. A lot of people didn't think so, but turned out he was. So, but I like Daniels. One thing that worries me a little bit about LSU is their secondary. They've basically patchworked their secondary through the transfer portal. Especially their defense. Their defensive front is going to be awesome. Their linebackers are awesome. They probably have the best receiving core in the SEC. I would say, yeah, I'd probably say that. I'd probably say they have the best receiving core in the SEC. But once again, they do play Florida State to open the year, and Florida State's number 8. I'm going to talk about them in just a second. They open the year with them. Then you got to play Alabama, Texas A&M, all the teams out of the West, Arkansas. Then you got to play Florida out of the East. I mean, LSU's got a tough schedule. Got to play Bama on the road. So that's why I have LSU at 10-2. But I could easily see them winning 11 too. So, but I'm not going to predict it. I'm not going to be cheap and every one of these be like, well, I could see them going 6-6, but I could see them being 12-0 too. No, I'm not going to do that because that's cheating. Yeah, I could see them winning all their games, or I could see them winning none, or somewhere in between. Yeah. Okay. Number 6, USC with a 9.5 over under. Okay, so USC, I'm not as high on USC. And one is their schedule. They got a tough schedule this year. The Pac-12, to me, especially quarterbacks this year, they're one of the top leagues. And I think the Pac-12 is going to be a little bit of a knife fight out there. I think you're going to have a couple of really good teams out there. I like Oregon. I like Washington. There's going to be some teams improved. UCLA might be pretty good this year. I'm still on the fence about them, but I've heard some good things coming out of their camp. So USC's got a tough schedule. They got Lincoln Riley. So, I mean, obviously their offense is going to be good because they've returned Caleb Williams, the Heisman winning quarterback. So their offense is going to be fine. It's the defense that worries me, as everybody says. It's the defense. Well, on any Lincoln Riley team, it's always the defense that you worry about. And they're making some strides. They've got some good transfers in. They got Bear Alexander out of Georgia. They've got some other good players in. Can't think of them all offhand, but I know they've had a many good defensive players portal in. So USC will be better on defense, but I think their schedule keeps them down this year. So I got USC at 9-3. I got them just below their over/under. I just think a couple of those teams, their schedule's just too tough. They play Notre Dame. USC's got a tough schedule. But when you have an offense, you can outscore teams, so you have a shot. But boy, if your defense isn't good, if you can't stop a team, it's hard to outscore them. Okay. So that pretty much covers USC 9-3. Okay, number 7, we got Penn State. This is another team I'm very high on. One, I like James Franklin as a head coach. Anybody that can come into Vandy and win 8 games in a season, go to bowls. Vanderbilt, people do not realize how hard a job that is in the SEC. And he did it. So James Franklin can coach, okay? I know he hasn't won it all or anything at Penn State, but the guy can coach. Like I said, they're over under 9.5. Not sure if I said that already. Probably did. But this is the Unprofessional College Football Show. So I got Penn State at 10-2 this year. But I almost picked them to be 11-1. I mean, I went back and forth till the last minute on whether I was going to pick them 10-2 or 11-1. But I've got them at 10-2. I love their running back, Nick Singleton. That kid is a beast. Love him. And they've got depth there too. He's not their only good back. Like Drew Aller, I think Drew's going to be a very good quarterback. I like their offensive line. I like their defense. They probably going to need better play out of their receivers, especially, having Aller at quarterback and not having a guy like Clifford that, he's kind of like a guy like Stetson Bennett that had played for 12 years. So it's hard to replicate that experience. People just think, oh, well, that guy's gone and the next guy come in and he'll just take over and be just as good. Well, see, Drew Aller physically and those tools, he's better than Sean Clifford ever thought about being. But he's not going to know as much as Sean Clifford did. So sometimes I think Aller's talent will have to lead the way. But the thing is, the kid's talented enough for it to happen. So I really like Drew Aller. So like I said, I got them going 10-2, but would not shock me if they won 11 and possibly snuck into the playoff. All right. Number 8, Florida State Seminoles. So they're another team that's at 9.5. There are a lot of 9.5s in the top 25. So Florida State, talked about them a little bit earlier as far as when I was discussing LSU. I like Florida State. They've got their quarterback returning, a good stable of backs, pretty good offensive line, good receivers, strong defense. Florida State, they've not hardly developed the depth that I think you necessarily need to win it all. But their starters, I think, are as good as about anybody's. And I say anybody's. I really like this Florida State team. They do have a pretty rough schedule. Of course, they open up with LSU, and that's not going to leave them a lot of room, for error if they lose that one. So then, of course, you got Clemson and the rest of the ACC that's on their schedule. I've got Florida State going 11-1 and making the playoffs. I'm sorry, I bought in. I've thought about it a lot, and my first playoff picks, they weren't in there. But the more I've heard, the more I've researched, the more I've looked at it and thought about it, I'm like, they may not have the most depth, but they've got solid depth. And like I said, their starters are as good as anybody. And they don't have, outside of LSU and Clemson, their schedule is not deadly. But you got 2 top 10 teams right there. So that's going to be tough. They're not going to be able to afford to lose but one. But I do have Florida State being 11-1 and making the playoffs. Obviously, they'd have the ACC title game to go through. But anyway. All right. So after 8 is Clemson. So Florida State and Clemson are right there. It also goes to show you there's basically almost no separation between the two. Florida State and Clemson are almost thought to be the same teams, per se. Clemson's over under. What a shock. 9.5. So, Clemson. I like Clemson. I want to say I like Clemson this year, but I don't like Clemson this year. I think Clemson has recruited well enough to be a top 5 team. The problem is Dabo is one of these guys that doesn't use the portal. So he doesn't, he uses it some. It's not like he won't use it at all. But I don't think he really bolsters his roster with it. And I think that's going to eventually come back to bite him. Like I think it's going to possibly come back and bite another team if they don't start doing it eventually. But Dabo, he's a proven head coach. He's won national titles. One of the few active coaches that's won national titles. And he's got a good team coming back. He'll have Cade Klubnik at running back, Will Shipley. I mean, Cade Klubnik at quarterback, Will Shipley at running back. I know their offensive line wasn't great this year. I'm expecting it to be improved. Clemson should have a phenomenal front. I mean, because Clemson, they recruit the front seven about as good as anybody does, especially the defensive line. So they'll be stout. I mean, no doubt that they will be stout. I have them at 9-3. I've got them losing to Florida State, and I have them dropping a couple of more games. You know, I don't get into the individual games at this point. I'll talk about that more week to week, but to me, it doesn't matter the specific games when you're talking about an overall record. It's what do you think the record will be, and is it? So Clemson, I've got 9-3. Obviously finishing behind Florida State. But decent season, but for what Clemson fans are accustomed to, it's really not. Okay, number 10, Washington. So Washington's over-under is 9, not 9.5. Washington's another team I like. They're another one of those Pac-12 teams. We'll call it Pac-12, I guess, as long as we can. Until one day it'll be the Pac something else. Probably packed up and left. But I like Washington. I like Penix. I liked him before he got to Washington. I always thought Penix was a quality quarterback. He just didn't have any help, really, before he got to Washington. He played at Indiana. So I like Penix. Washington, I foresee them being, like I said, 10-2. Quality team. I think they're going to be good on both sides of the ball. I think the offense is going to be good. I think the defense is going to be good. When you're good on both sides of the ball, you can beat almost anybody, and especially when you have a good quarterback. So I look a lot at the quarterback, especially in the Pac-12. It's kind of a quarterback league this year. A lot of good quarterbacks in the Pac-12. Okay, number 11, Texas. And I'm not going much further. You'll see why in a second. So next is Texas. Texas is over-under 9.5. I'll talk about Texas first. Okay, Texas is one of those teams that every year everybody talks about being back. You hear the national media talk about it every year. We're back. You know, Texas is back. And you hear one person say it, and then you hear about 100 people re-say it and repeat it. So, but to me, Texas, I like Texas. I like Quinn Ewers. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. He's going to play more consistent this year, I think, than he did last year. And when Ewers is on, there's not many quarterbacks in the country better than him. The thing about Texas is, not only have they got a good starting quarterback, they also have a good backup. I was really impressed with Malik Murphy in the spring. When I watched him, he looked very poised. And, I mean, he was throwing some rockets in there. And he was really impressive. And then they got Arch Manning. I'll give my take on Arch Manning, just because it's a little bit different than everybody else's. Okay. I think Arch Manning's going to be a really good quarterback in about 3 years. And you're going to say, oh, why do you say that? You know, this is why I say that. And it's not because he didn't look good in the spring game or whatever. I've said that way before he ever signed. This is why. One, he played in low division ball. Very low school ball. You watch some of the highlights of him, and some of the guys he's outrunning and beating look like junior high players. He did no camps. He never went against good competition. And don't get me wrong, just because you don't go against great competition doesn't mean that you can't be great. But it's gonna take time because you're used to playing kids that are not as good. You're used to the talent around you being better and your talent being way better. But and don't get me wrong, I don't blame Arch for not going and doing the camps. He didn't have to. He was rated the number one quarterback in the country and he never did any camps. He pretty much had his choice of offers. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Arch is stinks or anything. I just think he's going to take some time. He's going to be good. Just might be a while. Just don't expect it this year. You see that a lot in college where kids who come from small school ball takes them a little bit of time. Takes them a little bit of time to get adjusted. Okay, number 12, we got Tennessee. Tennessee's over or under is 9.5. I've got Tennessee at 10-2. Okay. Tennessee has the talent to beat Georgia this year. I really think they do. Their defense needs to improve a little bit. For them to really get where they want to go, their defense is going to have to improve, continue to improve. And Milton is going to have a similar season to what Hendon Hooker had last year. So, will it happen? I think he's going to have a really good season. I have him going 10-2. So I have him actually covering the over. But I have a hard time seeing this team being better record-wise than last year's team with what they had. Because Tennessee lost a lot. They lost their starting quarterback. They lost one of their top receivers. I actually lost a couple of receivers. And it's hard to replace that stuff. That's why every year is a different year. That's what kills me. Everybody wants to talk about last year and what happened last year. Yeah, that's great. But just because you beat somebody last year doesn't affect this year at all. It doesn't mean you're going to win. But I think Joe Milton will have a good season. I think Tennessee will end up either scaring or beating Georgia. That I really see that as being Georgia's slip up in Knoxville. But we'll see. And then the last team, as far as rankings go, is Notre Dame. They're at 13. Their over-under is 9. And I think that's spot on. I got them 9-3. But I'll tell you this. I think Sam Hartman is a dark horse Heisman candidate. I don't know if he has the receivers, to really win the award or not. Because, you can be a great quarterback, but if your receivers can't get open and catch the ball, you can't you can't get to the top like you want to. Just see Alabama last year. Bryce Young, number 1 pick in the draft, but when they needed somebody to step over at receiver, they didn't have it. So look for Sam Hartman to have a big year. They did lose Tommy Rees to Alabama, and of course Tyler Buckner came with him. Of course, all predictions you have to take into account that injuries cannot be taken into the equation. You can't predict injuries. If any major injuries happen, any prediction goes out the window. You might as well say. But I think Notre Dame will have a solid season this year. Their schedule's tough. Very tough. We talked about them earlier, but, they got to play Ohio State, too. They've got a rough schedule. I don't have their schedule right in front of me, but I know it's rough. I don't think they're going to shock the world or anything, but I think a solid 9-3 is what you could look for. Just looking down through here, not really going through a lot, just talking just general about some of the top 25. Oregon, I really like Oregon this year. Probably I could see them winning 10 games or more. Like Bo Nix, he's another one of those good Pac-12 quarterbacks. Look for Trayshawn Holden to have a big year for them too. In the spring game, Bo targeted him like 15 times. I think he likes Trayshawn. Look for that to be a big time connection this year. You got Ole Miss at 22. Sounds about right to me. I think Ole Miss will be good this year. Um, Everybody wants to just throw out Georgia playing Ole Miss as that they're just going to walk in there and blow them out. I think that's going to be a tougher game than other people do. Texas A&M at 23. That's about right. I see them. Being about 8-4 this year. I think the Petrino thing will somewhat work. But I'd still see them winning more than 8 games this year. Okay, so that's pretty much most of the top 25 and some other tidbits. But that's my preview show. So this is episode 1 of hopefully many. But if you guys are interested in, coming on and chatting, I'm going to be streaming every Tuesday. Currently, I'm going to have it about 8:30 Central Time PM. Going to be talking conferences. Going to be talking week-to-week predictions. Really looking forward to that. I will introduce you to the best person I know at picking against the spread. That is my wife. She is phenomenal at picking against the spread. She's phenomenal too. But one of the best at picking against the spread I've ever seen. So, yeah. So this is it. That's my first. It's my first live stream. If you was on, thank you. And if not, I look forward to seeing you next time. Like I said, Tuesdays at 8:30. And I'm also looking at doing some other streaming. But as of right now, I want to do some streaming on music. And actually, I want to stream some stories, some storytelling. So I think that'll be pretty fun. I think that'll be kind of interesting. So if you're interested in anything like that, check back, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I ain't gonna tell you to do all that. But anyway, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. Like I said, I wasn't gonna tell you to. Leave some comments if you got questions or certain things you'd like for me to cover. Hey, I just love talking college football. So come talk with me.